Johnny Carson caught these 7 celebrities lying on live TV. For over 3 decades, Carson reigned as late night's undisputed king, charming, witty, and sharper than anyone realized. He could spot a lie the way most people spot a joke, exposing exaggerations and contradictions with nothing more than a raised eyebrow. From aging movie idols to pop provocateurs, every kind of star eventually faced his quiet, devastating honesty. These are the moments when Hollywood's stories cracked under Johnny's smile. And if you like Johnny Carson, drop a like as a tribute and comment below your favorite on-air moment of his career. Tony Curtis had everything a golden age movie star needed: charisma, confidence, and looks that made him seem eternally young. But that last quality wasn't entirely by chance. Like many actors who came up in the old studio system, Curtis learned early that shaving a few years off his age could keep leading roles coming longer. For decades, he played along with the myth, until a simple question from Johnny Carson cracked it wide open. During one Tonight Show appearance in the 1970s, Curtis began sharing stories from his time in World War II. He spoke vividly about enlisting, about the Navy, about how the experience shaped him as an actor. But when Johnny casually asked, "How old were you then?" Curtis answered so quickly and so incorrectly that even the math didn't make sense. The age he gave would have made him a young teenager serving in the military. The audience didn't need to say a word. Carson paused, gave that trademark half smile, and let the silence hang just long enough for everyone to realize the slip. He never accused, never embarrassed, just tilted his head and moved on, leaving the truth sitting quietly in the air. Curtis laughed it off, tried to steer the story elsewhere, but the moment lingered. Insiders later said Johnny chuckled about it backstage, joking he should know better than to talk about the war if he wants to stay 40 forever. It was the kind of gentle exposure Carson mastered. No hostility, no humiliation, just one question that made a decades-old illusion crumble. And if Curtis's little fib was born from vanity, the next star's fabrication was built from fantasy, a royal one at that. Few stars embodied glamour like Zsa Zsa Gabor. With her accent, diamonds, and dazzling charm, she turned every interview into a performance, but behind the glitter and gowns, one question followed her everywhere. Was she truly royalty, or just playing one on TV? Zsa Zsa loved to tell stories about her noble Hungarian family, often referring to herself as a countess or a princess, depending on the night. It was part of her act, a fantasy that kept her fascinating. Most hosts let her keep up the illusion. Johnny Carson, though, wasn't most hosts. During one of her Tonight Show appearances, Gabor leaned into her usual tales of aristocracy when Johnny cut in, his tone casual but deliberate. "Is that a real title, or the Hollywood kind?" The audience burst out laughing. Zsa Zsa didn't flinch, but for just a second you could see it, that blink of surprise before she recovered with a perfect quip. "Darling, in Hollywood, all titles are real." The crowd roared, and Carson's grin said everything. Johnny didn't need to challenge her or make her look foolish. His power came from charm, the kind that could slice through any story while keeping everyone smiling. Backstage, he reportedly joked, "If she's Hungarian royalty, then I'm the king of Nebraska." It was one of Carson's defining traits. He let his audience see the truth without ever having to say it outright. Gabor's myth survived, but that brief pause, that blink, was the giveaway. And if Zsa Zsa's fib was a fairy tale made of diamonds and charm, the next story was no fantasy at all. It was a slow-motion tragedy. The night Johnny Carson watched a literary genius unravel before his eyes. Truman Capote was a genius, witty, eccentric, and one of the few writers whose personality was as famous as his prose. He'd charmed talk show audiences for years, including several memorable visits to The Tonight Show. But by the late 1970s, that brilliance had dimmed. Success had turned to scandal, and Capote's dependence on alcohol and pills became harder to hide. On one appearance, staff later recalled, Capote arrived pale and trembling, but insisted he was perfectly fine. Carson, who had interviewed hundreds of unpredictable guests, knew the difference between nerves and something deeper. When he asked gently, "You feeling all right tonight, Truman?" the author smiled and said, "Oh, Johnny, "I'm completely sober, just exhausted from writing." It was the wrong answer. His slurred words and meandering stories told the truth his mouth refused to admit. The audience grew quiet as Johnny tried to keep the show on track, throwing him lifelines in the form of easy questions and soft laughter. But it was clear, this wasn't the witty Capote people remembered. Eventually, Carson made a rare call. He cut to commercial early. When the show returned, Truman was gone. Backstage, Johnny was reportedly shaken. Not angry, saddened. He later said to producers, "That wasn't uncomfortable television. That was watching a man disappear." It was a haunting moment and a reminder that Carson's radar for dishonesty wasn't just about vanity or ego. It was about humanity. He could see the difference between a performance and a cry for help. And while Capote's deception was born from denial, the next guests came from something far more explosive. A temper so famous, even Johnny's cool couldn't hide it. Robert Blake had built his reputation playing intense, unpredictable characters, the kind of roles that made you wonder how much of the anger was acting. By the late 1970s, that intensity followed him off-screen, and Hollywood whispers about his temper were hard to ignore. When he appeared on The Tonight Show, Carson, ever the gentleman, brought it up with a soft touch. Johnny mentioned Blake's passionate on-set reputation, giving him a chance to set the record straight. Blake leaned forward, serious as ever, and declared, "I've never yelled at a crew member in my life. That's just Hollywood gossip." The audience chuckled, but Johnny didn't. He simply raised his eyebrows, tilted his head, and smiled that famous half-smile. The same one that meant, "I know more than I'm saying." The room erupted with knowing laughter. Blake smiled too, but there was tension behind it, because everyone in the studio knew what Johnny knew. According to staff who worked that night, Blake had actually lost his temper backstage just hours before taping, snapping at a stagehand over a lighting delay. Carson never mentioned it on air. He didn't have to. His expression said everything. It was Johnny's unspoken rule: you could stretch the truth about fame, fortune, or age, but never about how you treated people behind the scenes. After the show, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon, "He yelled at a guy an hour ago. That's not Hollywood gossip. That's Tuesday." It became one of the most famous silent call-outs in Tonight Show history, a masterclass in exposing hypocrisy with nothing but a look. And while Blake's temper flared behind the scenes, the next star's lie played out in front of millions, and it ended with whipped cream, laughter, and one perfect cue card. If there was ever a guest who could go toe-to-toe with Johnny Carson, it was Burt Reynolds. Both were quick, charming, and mischievous. And together, they created some of the most unpredictable moments in Tonight Show history. But one of those moments, which appeared hilariously spontaneous on TV, turned out to be anything but. It happened during one of Burt's classic visits in the 1970s, when a mock feud between the two was at its comedic peak. The pair traded playful insults, throwing water, and eventually, Burt grabbed a handful of shaving cream and smeared it across Johnny's face. The audience howled. Carson, drenched and grinning, seemed caught off guard. At least, that's what everyone thought. But after the laughter died down, Johnny reached into his desk drawer and pulled out that night's cue card. It read plainly, "Burt hits Johnny with shaving cream." He held it up to the camera and deadpanned, "Then what's this?" The crowd roared even louder. Reynolds burst out laughing, realizing he'd been caught pretending the prank was spontaneous. Of course, Carson had been in on it the whole time, and exposing the fake spontaneity was part of the act. That was Johnny's brilliance. He could turn even a staged gag into another layer of comedy. The prank wasn't just funny. It was meta before anyone used that word. Behind the laughter was a deep friendship built on trust, timing, and mutual respect. Their chemistry showed that even when the joke was planned, the magic was real. But while Burt's lie was harmless fun, the next one wasn't nearly so charming. Because when Madonna sat across from Johnny Carson, she claimed innocence, and Johnny wasn't buying a word of it. By 1987, Madonna wasn't just a pop star. She was a cultural earthquake. Provocative music videos, band performances, and endless headlines made her the queen of controversy. So when she walked onto The Tonight Show to promote her new film, Who's That Girl?, even Johnny Carson knew it was going to be unpredictable. And it was. From the start, Madonna turned the interview into a flirtatious spectacle, leaning close to Johnny, teasing him, and dropping one risque comment after another. The audience couldn't get enough, but Carson, as always, played the long game. After one particularly eyebrow-raising remark, he leaned back, smiled, and said, "You seem to enjoy shocking people." Without missing a beat, Madonna replied, "I wasn't trying to shock anyone." It was a small sentence, but it was the exact wrong one to say to Johnny Carson. His expression didn't change, but his eyes said everything. Then came the legendary punchline, "Then you must do that in church too." The audience erupted. The laughter rolled on, and even Madonna, momentarily caught, couldn't help but grin. It was Carson at his best. No aggression, no confrontation, just one perfectly timed quip that cut straight through the performance. He knew when someone was selling an image, and he knew how to expose it without breaking the show's flow. After that night, Madonna was never invited back during Carson's tenure. Not banned exactly, but quietly retired from his guest list. Johnny didn't mind rebellion, he just demanded honesty about it. And while Madonna's fib was playful, the final story in our countdown came from a true rock and roll legend, one whose "I'm fine" nearly brought the entire show to a halt. Chuck Berry was already a living legend when he appeared on The Tonight Show. The father of rock and roll, known for his electric stage presence and signature swagger, Berry didn't just command attention, he expected it. But one night, that confidence collided head-on with Carson's calm professionalism. The story goes that the show was running late, and a production assistant went backstage to let Berry know his performance would be pushed back a few minutes. Ever polite, Chuck smiled and said, "I'm totally fine waiting." Relieved, the staff returned to the set, only to discover moments later that the rock legend had vanished. He'd left the studio entirely. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. The Tonight Show crew scrambled to fill the airtime, while Carson, ever composed, carried on without missing a beat. Later, as the chaos settled, Johnny reportedly just chuckled and said, "Well, I guess fine means something different in rock and roll." It became an inside joke around NBC for years, the Chuck Berry okay. Whenever a guest claimed to be fine with something they clearly weren't, producers would whisper, "Is that fine? Or Chuck Berry fine?" Carson never badmouthed him publicly. He didn't need to. His quiet humor turned the whole situation into Tonight Show legend, a reminder that honesty mattered more to him than star power. Berry's exit wasn't just an inconvenience. It was the one kind of deception Carson couldn't stand, the kind that broke trust, not image. And that's why, even after thousands of interviews, Johnny's reputation endured. He didn't just expose liars, he revealed the truth, often without ever saying a word. Johnny Carson didn't need confrontation or controversy to uncover the truth, just a pause, a smile, and that famous raised eyebrow that could disarm anyone in Hollywood. Whether it was a small vanity lie or a meltdown disguised as composure, he handled every guest with grace and humor. In a world now obsessed with shock value, Carson proved that real honesty and real entertainment don't need to shout to be heard. His legacy isn't just laughter, it's truth told softly with a smirk. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more forgotten Hollywood tales.